everybody, Leah Harlann here. Today's video is going to be a sort of personal challenge to help me get through my massive backlog of book subscription boxes, because since about the beginning of the year, or slightly before that, I have been subscribed to Fairy Loot's both adult and YA, as well as Illumicrate's monthly book-only boxes, and unfortunately I have not completed a single book out of any of them. So here in part one, we're going to take a look at all of my Illumicrate boxes, which I've been receiving since November of last year, although I did skip the month of April. And I'm basically going to be challenging myself to read the first couple chapters of each of these books to see which ones I might be more interested in reading sooner, which ones might get put off, and which ones may end up being like unhauled down the road. But let's get started. Okay, so the way I see this video working is we're going to go through all of my Illumicrate books that have arrived since I began this subscription last November through this month's, or the most recent box I have received, which currently is June, but before the end of the video I may receive July's, so we'll see. But yeah, we're just going to look over each one going in order, and I'll read the first couple chapters of each book. I'll talk a little bit about each one and my thoughts on it, and then I'll kind of sort it into like, oh yes, I want to read this one really soon, or, you know, oh, I'm interested, but I'm going to put it on the backlist, like on the lower down on the TBR, or this book is not interesting to me at all, and I'll have to come back around to it later to decide if I'm going to unhaul it. So here is a graphic I've put together showing all of the books that I own from the Illumicrate listings. I did mention before that I skipped one. The only month that I have skipped from Illumicrate is April, which was a sort of sci-fi book called Some Desperate Glory. It just really wasn't interesting to me at the time, and I had some other expenses, so I decided to skip that month. That's one of my favorite things about Illumicrate, is you can skip any month if you're just not interested. I am someone who likes to look up the books in advance to see what book will be coming, and then decide for myself if I really, you know, if it sounds really not up my alley or not interesting, I can decide to skip it. All right, so the first book I'm going to be checking out is The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. I actually have it right here with me, but you can see me. Well, my arms may be holding it, but I'll put a picture here of my copy. So yeah, I'm going to read the first couple chapters, but to give you an idea of what it's about, it seems like a sort of, I don't want to say like horror. I don't think it goes all the way to horror, but maybe like kind of spooky vibes. Maybe a little like thriller mystery-esque. It's about a girl named Winnie Wednesday who wants to join a group called the Luminaries, which is an ancient order that protects their town of Hemlock Falls, because there is a forest outside the town that apparently, like, there are things in the forest that might kill you. So the Luminaries protect their town and, of course, the rest of humanity from what is in the forests. And but Winnie's father was exposed as a witch and therefore labeled a traitor, and so her family has kind of been like shunned. But when she turns 16, she can take the Hunter Trials to join the Luminaries and hopefully, you know, get her family and herself back in the town's good graces. So yeah, it's definitely not in the typical genre or like type of book that I would normally be reading. I don't know why I'm doing this. Let me just put the book down. It's not on my typical wheelhouse, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I've heard a lot of good things about Susan Dennard as an author, though I've never read anything by her before. So yeah, I'll check back in once I've read a little bit of the book. Okay, so I have finished my sampling of The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. I ended up reading 3 chapters because chapter 2 was like less than a page and a half long. Chapter 4 looked like it was going to be the same way, so I wonder if that's like a sort of running structural choice throughout the book. I don't think I'll be reading it anytime soon, which is kind of what I predicted, but just a couple things that were, you know, kind of interesting to me regardless. So I noted when I was reading the summary, you know, the characters mentioned are Winnie Wednesday and Jay Friday. And I was like, I wonder if like weekday family names are like a thing in this book. It is. It very much is. There's like there's a major family slash clan in Hemlock Falls for every day of the week, and there are like, I guess, historical plot reasons for why that is. I won't explain too much, and I don't read as much YA as I used to. As I get older, I find it harder and harder to relate to the characters. So, yeah, right off the bat, some of the sort of like interpersonal relationships that Winnie is describing herself to have with other characters similar in age to her, I just kind of found boring or, silly in a sense. A teenage drama is quite silly to me nowadays, especially when it takes place in modern settings. And I just find usually in more fantasy settings, I have an easier time enjoying YA protagonists because there are greater problems and issues at play that are more, serious and life and death than, oh, my ex-best friend and I don't get along anymore. And like, oh, those girls, like they're so popular, so I can't be friends with them, even though they're really nice to me. Like, that stuff like that. Next one that I'm going to check out is the Red Scholar's Wake. And to give you a brief summary of this one, so this is a book that focuses on two protagonists, Shixi, who is a bot maker, data analyst, mother, and scavenger, but she was captured by the Red Banner pirates and their fleet, who are really famous for their cruelty and double dealing. And so she just kind of hopes that she can survive as an indentured servant. But of course, the alternative is being tortured to death for fun by pirates, space pirates. So that sucks for her. And then the other POV is Ricefish. Well, I don't know if this will be an actual dual POV novel, just that these are the two leading characters. Ricefish, who is a sentient spaceship and the leader of the Red Banner pirates. And apparently wife to a figure known as the Red Scholar, but that person died under suspicious circumstances. And so Ricefish kind of wants to solve this mystery and whether or not she and her pirate fleet are in danger. And so it seems like they're going to team up together somehow. I think this is like a contract marriage, fake marriage, marriage of convenience type trope. And if what I remember reading on Goodreads about this is correct. And so I have to say, like, there are some very interesting elements brought up in this initial teaser for the book, but I don't read a lot of sci-fi, so we'll have to see if and this seems to be leaning pretty heavily into the fantastical side of sci-fi, less grounded in hard science, because we've got like sentient pirate ships. And I don't know about this one, but I am willing to give it a try. And a sapphic space fantasy space opera sounds pretty interesting. So I checked out the first couple chapters of The Red Scholar's Wake by Aliette de Bodard. I think I said that correctly. And it's definitely an interesting premise, but there just really wasn't enough to hook me in those first couple chapters. There's definitely like a sort of good introduction of the characters we're working with, at least in the main pair, and the circumstances surrounding it. This is, that trope of a contract marriage or a marriage of convenience, which I do like. I do like that trope when I see it. But yeah, it's just maybe it's a little too outside the realm of my usual readings of stories that contain this trope, because it is like very sci-fi, but I am very interested in the sci-fi world that Bodard is building, so I kind of do hope to get back to this eventually, but probably not anytime soon. So yeah, next one on the list is one I'm really looking forward to. It's one I've been meaning to get to for a long, long time. I've heard lots of really good things about it, and that is God Killer by Hannah Kaner. So the premise of God Killer is that the main character is Kissin, and her family were kind of killed by a god. This is a world with lots of different gods, and so she now works as a contract god killer. I assume that's where the title came from. I guess she runs into a character, a sort of god that she can't kill for some reason. And then, they're kind of both on the run, and they pick up at least one other companion. And I do like fantasy stories where you end up with like a sort of group that gets thrown together by circumstances. Doesn't have to be found family, but is a bonus if they end up becoming found family. And let me just read you the excerpt that's on the back of the Illumicrate edition on the dust jacket. Kissin ripped her sword out through the god's side in a stink of blood and dank water, and the shrine behind the waterfall shattered. The god made no sound as her flesh turned back into the current and sank into the river, releasing it for the town and villages it fed, to thrive or fail. But she managed a last barb to Kissin's mind. When Midrin falls to the gods, your kind will be the first to die. So yeah, I'll let you know how this one goes, but this is definitely out of the pile, one of the ones I had the highest expectations for going in, so I really hope I like it. Okay, so it's been a couple weeks since I've recorded a bit for this. I was very busy during the month of August with the magical readathon, so it did take me a while. After all, it felt like a waste of effort and time to start a book that I couldn't commit to finishing inside the month of August for the magical readathon. So I did have to put this little project on the back burner, but I am back, having now checked out the first couple chapters of God Killer by Hannah Kaner, and I absolutely loved it. It was a great turnaround from the first couple books that were either total disappointments or just kind of meh for me. I actually started reading into chapter 2 when I was supposed to stop already. I read the prologue and chapter 1. I felt like that was enough. And then I had already kind of dove into chapter 2 without even really thinking about it. I just was really enjoying the setup they gave us. We know right away, what happened to Kissin's family and why she's so motivated in her job as a god killer. It just really gave us a lot of her character in the first few pages, and I really wanted to see where she would go next and what she would do. I mean, I didn't even get invested or introduced into the main conflict or relationship like I did in the Red Scholar's Wake, but I really wanted to keep reading. So yeah, I'd say this one is going to make it on to the priority TBR. Small side note, I of course mentioned before that it is now, that was the month of August that I had last recorded a bit in, and so now we're in September, which means I have received my July and August Illumicrate boxes since I first started this project. So yeah, basically, let's just say that for every Illumicrate book that I get for the duration of this project, it will get added to the list of Illumicrate books that I check out, that I sort of do these teaser reads and then evaluate whether or not they stay at home and on the TBR pile, high or low on the TBR pile, or whether I put them in a pile to perhaps add to like my Pango Book shop or try to unhaul them somewhere else. But for now, let's move on. The next book on the list was the February Illumicrate box for 2023. The book in that one was called Song of Silver, Flame Like Night by Amelie Wen Zhao. I'm not going to lie, I had heard about this book well before we were teased that it was going to be in the February box. And if you follow my Twitter, you know I like to post spoilers for what the books are going to be in the Fairy Loot and Illumicrate boxes as soon as I get their theme reveals and I go do some digging because I like to know what I'm buying. You know, some people like the surprise, I don't. And I was in love with this book from the very first time I read the premise. It's about a girl named Lan who had whose land was colonized by Atlanteans, I think are the people. And she's kind of got this, like, you know, she's got that mysterious past. She has a weird mark that her mom burned onto her before her mother passed away. And the mark is invisible to everyone except for this boy, the presumed love interest. But of course, being a fantasy, these two, once their paths cross, they become very intertwined and they have to go on this adventure together. And I mean, honestly, I don't even remember reading much of the premise. I just saw it being compared, or the author said she was inspired by Chinese wuxias. And I was like, bing, bang, boom, sold. Definitely getting that book box. And so this is another one that I've really been wanting to pick up and check out, but just couldn't seem to find the time or was having a hard time getting invested in fantasies. So I'm really looking forward to checking this one out. It's a gorgeous edition, by the way, from Illumicrate. It was blurbed by Sulin Tan, who I do really like. She wrote Daughter of the Moon Goddess, the duology. It was also blurbed by Shelley Parker Chan, another favorite author. I'm waiting on my duology from The Broken Binding to come in so I can finally read He Who Drowned the World. And then it was also blurbed by Rebecca Ross, who I haven't read A River Enchanted, but it's another set of books that's on the list that I really want to get to. So yeah, just all around good vibes, good feeling about it. Can't wait. Now, I've never read anything else by this author, although I know that they have a prior series. I believe the first book is called The Blood Air. And the only things I knew about this book going in were basically that it's very heavily wuxia inspired. And I mean, honestly, I didn't really get a lot from the like inside jacket description either. But I went ahead and read the sort of, there's like a timeline at the beginning that describes the sort of ages that this land has gone through. It's a very thinly veiled fantasy China. And then I read the first chapter, and the first chapter is kind of a decent length, so I stopped there. It also just kind of had a nice stopping point. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. However, it was not an easy read. It's fantasy and it's an Asian-inspired fantasy, so it has a lot of words and names and things like that that just don't process super instinctively in my brain, so I kind of had to like sit on a lot of words. I was rereading passages. There's also just a little like something that kind of bothered me. I was doubling back and checking things because I thought that there were sort of like inconsistencies about like the time of day or where characters were standing, and I couldn't actually find hard contradictions, but for some reason just the way it was written I kept thinking that there were contradictions in the writing. So I'm not sure. I don't think it's a bad thing, and again, I may have just been overthinking it, but I am going to keep this one, and I do want to read it, but it's not going to be an easy read. It's definitely one of those ones that I'm going to like have to chew on a lot as I go. It's not going to be like an easy breezy, beautiful cover girl kind of read for me. Definitely not like how God Killer was super easy to read, and I found myself, in the middle of chapter 2 before I realized it. The next book is one that I did hear some buzz ahead of time for it, just a little bit. There was like a bit of a controversy. This one is Lies We Sing to the Sea by Sarah Underwood. And I remember there was sort of like some gossip buzz in the book space leading up to this book where people thought that the author hadn't read the Odyssey before writing a sapphic retelling of a portion of the Odyssey. But as it turns out, she I think she says in an article that she hadn't read like the original of the Odyssey in full, front to back, beginning to end. But the Odyssey is like a massive epic that spans multiple arcs, and she only took one portion of the Odyssey in her retelling. And for that portion, she did extensively research and read many different translations and versions of it. Because it was originally an oral story, so of course there will be variations in the telling over the many, many years and centuries that have gone by. But I'm willing to give this one a good chance. I did hear some good things about it from a couple of book talkers. Amivi Reads, shout out to you. I remember seeing your TikTok that was like, the girlies better show up for this book with its sapphic Greek retelling romance, relationship or something. So I want to go in ready to love this book. I do love myself a good Greek retelling. I am one of those people who loved Circe. But I haven't read the Song of Achilles. So what does that make me? Do I get canceled by Book Talk because I haven't read Song of Achilles? Anyway, I'm excited to try this one out. This one is about Leto or Leto, depending on how you pronounce her name. It's the kingdom of Ithaca, and every summer, 12 girls are hung and sacrificed as a gift to Poseidon. And Leto is up to bat to hang this year, but instead of dying, she wakes up on a mysterious island, greeted by the immortal Melantho. And this is all, and Melantho explains that, Odysseus is the reason for all of these sacrifices that have to happen, and because of Queen Penelope and her original 12 maids. And so Leto sets out on a journey to break the curse. And there's a prince who's also in this. And so, like, I feel like the jacket is a bit of a misdirect. It says that Leto has love growing for both Melantho and Matthias, the prince. So it kind of makes it seem like there's going to be a love triangle, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, especially if this is supposed to be a sapphic romance, and that's what it was being marketed as. But who knows? Maybe it won't actually be that much of a triangle, a V situation once we get into the book, and it was just for marketing. right, so I checked out The Lies We Sing to the Sea by Sarah Underwood, and I mean, there just wasn't a lot to go on in the opening chapter content. So, I mean, I love Greek retellings. I'm pretty sure I've said that before. And so I am willing to give this one the benefit of the doubt. They do kind of tend to start off a little slower in my experience with the ones I've liked. So, but yeah, just nothing that's really standing out so far. It kind of having like a typical setup in terms of like some of the standard fantasy stuff, and which, you know, a lot of Greek retellings tend to lean on certain fantasy tropes. So yeah, just I don't want to get rid of it, but I think it's going on the low end of the TBR pile. Definitely not a priority for now. The next book I have to check out in the list is May's Illumicrate book, because I skipped April's. April's was a sci-fi called Some Desperate Glory, and I just kind of wasn't really feeling it from what I saw on it, and it just didn't seem like it was worth taking a risk on, and Illumicrate gives you unlimited skips. So I went ahead and skipped April, and so I'm jumping straight into May, which is Witch King by Martha Wells. Now, I've heard pretty middling opinions on this one. A lot of people love Martha Wells' Murderbot series, which I do intend to check out eventually at some point. But yeah, it seems like her fantasy just isn't quite as popular. And I'm not sure if this is a standalone, but Witch King is about some sort of sorcerer or mage named Kai, who wakes up as like a sort of disembodied soul and is like his consciousness was kind of dormant and he was murdered, according to the synopsis. And he doesn't, when he kind of comes to, it's because like some other mages are trying to like steal his magic or something. And it wakes him up though, but like he doesn't know why he was imprisoned. He doesn't know like how much time has passed or what's been going on in the world since he was killed. And so it's sort of like it says in the synopsis that he utilizes pain magic, which I'm very interested in reading about. I don't see it too often in the stories that I read. So, but yeah, really not a lot to go on in the initial synopsis, just kind of giving you like the setup, not really telling you what's going to keep the story going. No, it doesn't mention any sort of, you know, war that he's going to have to stop or some great evil that he's going to have to rise up against. In fact, it kind of seems like, based on the quote, that he may not have been a very good person. The quote inside the jacket says, "I didn't know you were a demon." And then it says, "You idiot, I'm the demon." So yeah, interested to check this one out. Like I said, never read anything else from Martha Wells, so this will be my first try of her. Okay, so I checked out the first chapter of The Witch King, and yeah, still not really sure what's going on. The pain magic was interesting, and I'm very interested in Kai and his companion, who, oh shoot, what was her name?
when he first like comes to in the first chapter, there's like somebody else that also comes to. Zed, I'm not sure how you say her name. Zaidi, I really don't know. It's one of those fantasy names, and she piqued my interest. I'm not, like there's mentioned that they have some sort of magical bond that lets Kai know where she is and things like that. And it seems like while he was killed, she was just put in some sort of like suspended coma. She wasn't killed, but she was kept nearby where he was. So yeah, just a kind of interesting. But the first chapter really only is just about Kai waking up and trying to get his bearings. So I don't think I'm going to put this one high up on the TBR either. But I didn't dislike anything in the first chapter. And then the next book that I will be reading was June's Illumicrate pick, which they did announce this one well in advance since they were publishing it with their own in-house printer, Daphne. I believe it's calling Daphne Publishing or something. Daphne Press. Yes, Daphne Press. And so this book was The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero Lacruz. This is one that I heard a lot of excitement for before it came out from the fantasy community that reads more like diverse authors and things like that, because this one is based on like certain South American mythologies, which you really don't see in fantasy that often. And I have to say, I also was looking forward to it after hearing some of the, build up around it, and some of the hype did rub off on me. But unfortunately, since then, I have heard, similar to The Witch King, some very middling opinions, some opinions that it just like, this is, I think, a debut author, so perhaps the craft wasn't quite up to people's expectations. But I think there were also some elements of the plot itself that left people kind of wanting more, or they had been expecting a little more. But this is about a girl named Reina who is apparently driven to taking refuge with her grandmother that she didn't know, like she never had a connection to, and she has to sort of make a journey to get to her. And there's sort of like magical creatures, and eventually her grandmother, who is a dark sorceress, does save her life. But now Reina is sort of bound to her grandmother, and something about like an ancient god, I think that is also related to her grandmother, either her power or just something there. And then there's another character called Ava. She is a sort of like illegitimate child, and she has magic, has to keep it a secret. That's a classic character type right there. So yeah, we'll see how The Sun and the Void turns out. All right, so I have finished reading the first chapter of The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero Lacruz, and let's just say, it was pretty mid. Really not much. There was a very striking, sort of violent scene, but I don't know. The writing just feels a smidge unpolished. It just kind of feels like a new author, if you know what I mean. So, and it's certainly got some elements I'm curious about, like the non-human races that we've already seen hints or small appearances of. But yeah, just I haven't been hooked yet. So, I didn't dislike it. I'm curious about whatever kind of magic is here. I'm still curious about what's going to be different about a South American fantasy setting. But yeah, so far, just not much to go off of in chapter 1. So I'm going to put this aside. It's kind of hovering between low TBR and DNF, and Unhaul. So I might need to give this one a little further, get a little further into it. Anyway, so that was The Sun and the Void. The next book is the July Illumicrate book, which is called The Jad Air by Sarah Hashem. And I'm just going to read the inside jacket for this one. 10 years ago, the kingdom of Jad burned. Its magic was outlawed, its royal family murdered down to the last child. At least, that's what Sylvia wants people to believe. The lost heir of Jad, Sylvia never wants to be found. She can't think about how Nizal's armies destroyed her kingdom and continue to hunt its people, not if she wants to stay alive. But when Aaron, the Nizal heir, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Nizal heir, tracks a group of Jasadi rebels to her village, staying one step ahead of death gets trickier. In a moment of anger, Sylvia reveals her magic and captures Aaron's attention. Now, to save her life, she'll have to make a deal with her greatest enemy. If she helps him lure the rebels, Sylvia will escape persecution. A deadly game begins. Sylvia can't let Aaron discover her identity, even as hatred shifts into something more. But her secret isn't as hidden as she thinks. Soon, Sylvia will have to choose between the life she wants and the one she left behind. The Scorched Kingdom is rising, and it needs a queen. I'm interested in this one because I have heard it's based on Egyptian mythology, and the author herself is Egyptian American. And so I'm really curious. I don't see, I used to love Egyptian mythology when I was younger. We all had those different mythology phases we were super obsessed with as kids, right? Some of us just never left our Greek mythology phase. But yeah, Egyptian mythology was super interesting. I'm also getting into a Celtic mythology phase. Okay, off track. Yeah, I'm curious about this one. I don't know if it's standalone or not. Feels like it could be the beginning of a series, though. That's just kind of the vibes I got from the synopsis. So, I'm back. It's been a little while, actually, since I filmed the last segment, but I did finally get around to reading chapter 1 of the Jad Air, and it kind of, I don't know, it gave me some intrigue, some things that made me curious, but it just really didn't give me enough to turn this into a page turner. So I am going to put it down, but I do still love the concepts that it's playing with and some of the sort of initial relationships it's established between the main character and kind of like her two childhood friends. So there are things that got my interest, but yeah, like I said, just not enough to really make this like an unputdownable book. So I am going to put it lower on the TBR and move on. Now, the next book that I'm going to check out is actually one that I am so excited for, and I will admit that I kind of stalled on working on this video for a while in hopes that this one would arrive in time, and it did. And so did the one after. But this next book was the August Illumicrate box or book called. And I've never read anything else from this author, but what caught my eye earlier this year when looking ahead at new releases was that this one was described as, and I mean, those are two things that I absolutely love and were very impactful on me in my development years when I was forming my identity as like an adult. So when I was a teenager. And so, of course, I was super interested. And I did make a TikTok when I unboxed this where you can actually hear me say, like, oh my God, when I saw the naked hardcover of this Illumicrate edition, it is gorgeous. Oh my gosh, there's just so much to love in this synopsis. I even get a little bit of the hints of like the Cinderella, like I get, that initial comparison. I'm sure there's more to it than just the mention of the stepmother and like the cruel stepmother aspect and a sort of maybe prince figure. Maybe she's hiding something about herself. I don't know. But here's hoping. Fingers crossed. I cannot wait to check this one out. Hello, everybody. Leah Harlann here. It's been another hot minute since the last time I recorded a bit for this video. Fair amount has happened since the last time I was able to sample one of my books. I did pick, but I also got back into classes, and I ended up choosing as a book for one of the assignments I had to do. So I ended up reading all of since the last time I recorded. I will say that I think the first chapter did give me a good sort of sample teaser. It gave us a pretty good insight into, where she's at the beginning of the book and her relationship dynamics. You really get a feel for that Cinderella retelling. But of course, there are some differences. But yeah, it's going to be hard to give my thoughts without the rest of the book coloring my opinion at this point. But I will say it was definitely going to be a high priority TBR, even after just the first chapter. It was one of those ones that I was excited even from the premise. So I don't really think that there was ever a chance of it falling out of favor after just one chapter with me. So there is some personal bias there. But as I mentioned in the last bit, the next month's Illumicrate had already come in at the time, and that was A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. And I have heard so many good things about this book since that video recording. Like, a lot of other people had a chance to read it. And I will tell you a little bit of what it's about. It's about this young girl named Effie who has always dreamed about the Fairy King. And there is a particular author called Emrys Murden who wrote about the Fae and a lot of other amazing stories. He was a beloved author in their country of Lear, but he did recently pass away. And but his family decides to host a sort of competition to design a home called Hiraeth Manor. And Effie is an architecture student. She didn't want to be, but she is in the architecture college. And so she decides to enter the competition. And surprisingly, I believe she is chosen, but so is another person, a boy named Preston Hellery. I'm not sure how you say his name. But they have very different goals. So Effie, of course, loved Murden, the author, and kind of wants to like do this manor justice in the design. And Preston, on the other hand, who is a literature student, wants to prove that the author was a fraud. First chapter really drives home what a rough spot Effie's in. She didn't want to be an architecture student. She wanted to be a literature student like Preston, but the literature college doesn't accept women, even though she scored high enough to join them, and they are the most prestigious department in this university that she's going to. So she had to choose architecture as like just the second choice. It was the second most prestigious, so she just kind of settled for that one, but she actually doesn't really like architecture that much. And it seems like she had a pretty harrowing experience with some figure that gets mentioned, and there are content warnings at the beginning of the book for like sexual assault, I think. Or is it in the beginning of the book? Or did I just hear about it elsewhere? Okay, yeah, no, I don't think it actually has the content warning in this book, but I did hear from other people that there was like a content warning for like sexual assault, and it hasn't been mentioned explicitly yet. But I do, because it's just the first chapter. But I do think that is what happened between her and this character that has been mentioned and alluded to a couple times. And she is the only girl in the architecture college, so of course that comes with a lot of its own issues of like sexism, misogyny. I am familiar with that because I did study in the STEM field, although I didn't experience a lot of it firsthand, luckily, because my own college did have a pretty good representation of women. It was definitely one of the higher ratios in the country, but not perfect. And especially once I got out and tried working in various jobs, I definitely felt a little more the isolation of being like the only woman sometimes. And yeah, I don't work in STEM anymore for a reason, and well, for many reasons, but that could be considered one of them. So I definitely feel for Effie, and I definitely want to keep reading this one. I haven't read that many dark academia, and I've heard really good things about it. I don't think it's like super high priority, especially as we're coming into the end of the year, but I hope I get through it during this winter season when the vibes are still good. This is being recorded at a time where it's November right now, and I skipped October's box, which was, hold on, I have it written down. October was After the Forest by Kel Woods. And I did skip that one. And just as a heads up, I am also skipping November, which is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. Neither of them particularly sounded like books I was interested in, so I took advantage of Illumicrate's skipping feature once again, or well, twice in this case, to skip both of them. I am going to receive December's book. I already know kind of what it is. They've released the theme and the hints, and so I do like to look up and research ahead of time. They've even released emoji hints for the January, February, and March books of 2024. So I do kind of have predictions for those. So if you stick around to the end of the video, I will tell you what my guesses are for those books if you're interested. But I think I might try to check out both of those books that I skipped from the library just to sample the first chapters and see if I kind of feel like I made the right decision to skip them. Okay. Let's talk about the whole roundup. So I did check out the first chapter of April's Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh and October's After the Forest by Kel Woods. I don't really feel like giving the summary because after reading the first chapter of both, I felt like I made the right decision in skipping them. I just, there wasn't really anything that grabbed me. I didn't really feel like reading. I practically skimmed I pretty much skimmed the first chapter of Some Desperate Glory. And yeah. So let's put up the list of all the books from it's 1 year's worth of Illumicrate books. So it goes November 2022, starting with the Luminaries by Susan Dennard, all the way through October of 2023, which is After the Forest by Kel Woods. I'm not going to prolong this video by waiting for, I think Starling House did actually already come out, and I know for a fact it's going to be November's Illumicrate book, but I skipped that one as well, like I mentioned. So if we look at the whole list and do a sort of breakdown, I did decide to unhaul the Luminaries, and actually I put it up and then sold it already from my Pengo Book storefront. I decided to hold on to the Red Scholar's Wake, although I wasn't really keen on reading it right away. I would say there is two piles of keep at this point. One is the keep and I definitely want to read sooner, and then one is the keep it, but if I don't read it in the next maybe 6 to 8 months, I will unhaul it. And Red Scholar's Wake falls into that latter pile. God Killer by Hannah Kaner is in my higher priority TBR pile. Same with February's Song of Silver Flame Like Night by Amelie Wen Zhao, and they've already announced the sequel. March's Lies We Sing to the Sea by Sarah Underwood. I'm keeping because it is a Greek retelling that I'm interested in with the sapphic twist, although I don't think it's going to be high on the TBR. April's Some Desperate Glory, like I just mentioned, I did originally skip. I didn't really get anything out of the first chapter that I tried skimming, so I'm okay with this decision. May's Witch King by Martha Wells didn't give me a lot to go on, so it is in that same pile of I'm keeping it, but I'm probably not going to get to it right away. June's The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero La Cruz. I'm really torn on this one. I feel like I should keep it to potentially give it another try, but I just really haven't heard that many good things about it. I do think it's a good book for someone. I just think that a lot of people, especially in the bookish community that had higher expectations from it, ended up disappointed by what we got. So I'm not sure, but maybe somebody who doesn't have those expectations would enjoy it a lot more. So I think I'm going to keep it for now, but maybe even less than 6 months before I maybe unhaul it. The Jad Air by Sarah Hashem, I am also keeping for now. And then August, I've already completed because I read it for a class. I loved it. And then September's A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I also plan to keep. I don't know if it's necessarily high on my TBR, but it just depends on if I get through some of the other books that I really want to read and how long it takes me to get through those. And of course, the last book, After the Forest by Kel Woods, which I did skip, and I'm happy to have done so. So, unfortunately, statistically, there really were only a couple out of the whole year that ended up high on my TBR. Like God Killer and are the standouts, really, to me, as well as possibly Song of Silver, Flame Like Night. But let's also look at some statistics, because this is kind of my way of evaluating the whole year and if I feel like I'm getting my money's worth, because these are, like I might have mentioned at the beginning of the video, I have only been doing book-only boxes from Illumicrate, except for the first one, the November 2022 box, because the way it worked with Illumicrate was that I had to pay for one full box before I could switch to the book-only subscription. Okay, so here's some statistics that I found about the books. I did some research into the authors to the best of my ability, and here is what I found. In these 12 books, all 12 authors were women. In terms of like the race or ethnicity of all the authors, 7 out of 12 are white, as best I could tell. And then the last statistic I decided to look up was that of these 12 authors, 5 of them were debuts. So these books were their very first novels, or really their first traditional publishing in the industry. So to evaluate those statistics, I think that's decent. I mean, of course, it could be better, especially in terms of like their race and ethnicity. I would really like to see Illumicrate pick up more authors of color, particularly Black authors. Out of everyone that was non-white, most of them were Asian. So which is not a bad thing, but yeah, I would just really like to see a wider spread of diversity amongst the authors chosen. And then 5 out of 12 for debut isn't bad. I think especially for your monthly box, which is like the thing everybody has to pay for, it is nice to get a good mix of like things we might not necessarily be willing to take a chance on if we just see it on a shelf in a bookstore. But also we do want to see some of the more like popular releases from authors we already know and love. And we don't want all of those to be separated out into like the separate pre-orders, because that is really annoying. Like I'm already paying for the books every month that I like have to pay for in order to maintain my membership to have like early pre-order access for all those other special editions. So it would kind of suck if like only the really good books that I wanted, I had to pay more on top of my monthly book. So that's nice. I think after evaluating everything, I'm going to continue subscribing to Illumicrate. And honestly, though, like the biggest reason, despite not having too many like super winner picks in this past year, is just that ability to skip as many times as I want to. It's just really nice that if I go and look and research into what the future books are and they don't sound that interesting, I can easily choose to skip them, like how I've skipped these past 2 in a row. I am going to pick up December's. And spoiler alert, I will mention what December's book is. They have announced the theme already. And so, as best I can tell, I'm pretty positive that December's Illumicrate book will be called The Principle of Moments by Esme Njikiemi Pearson. I think that's how you say it. It is a sci-fi. And that will make it, I think, only the second Yeah, only the second sci-fi of the year. The first one being Some Desperate Glory, which I skipped in April. But this one does sound a little more interesting to me from what I've looked up of the premise, so I am going to get the December book. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I did do my best research into the emoji hints that Illumicrate has provided for January, February, and March of 2024. And let me see where I wrote them down. Yeah, I might skip one or two of them, honestly, just based on what I've read about them, but there is one in there that I am really excited. I've heard really good things about. So, if you don't want to know what my guesses are for the January, February, March 2024 Illumicrate books, you can go ahead and just skip to the end of the video. But if you are curious, these are what my guesses are. So January, we had the knife emoji, the sort of cruise ship type emoji, and then a wave. And so I believe that this book will be Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. It's a sort of murder mystery that takes place on a ship at sea, but it has fantasy elements. I think the tagline I saw was that if Agatha Christie wrote in fantasy, this is the book we would get. So I'm not a big murder mystery person. So again, I might end up skipping this one, but yeah, that is my guess. And then February, we had the bone, dragon, and flame emoji. And this one really stumped me for a really long time. I do think February's book is To Cage a God by Elizabeth May. And the reason this one had me stumped for so long was because it had a January publication date in the US, but it does have a February publication date in the UK. But another reason that does make me pretty confident that this is the choice is also because To Cage a God is being published by Daphne Press, who is Illumicrate's sort of in-house publisher. They were the ones who published The Sun and the Void, which was June's box this year. And they did tell us very well in advance of that one, so I am kind of surprised they haven't told us outright yet. I'm not sure about this one either. I may end up skipping it, just kind of depends on what's going on. Sorry, I'm fixing my headphones. And then the last one, March. This one also was kind of a stumper, and I did jump around with that one as well. But I think, and I'm quite excited, I will be quite excited if I'm right, I think the March pick is going to be Fathom Folk by Eliza Chan. And it does say its publication date is February 29th, but I think that puts it perfectly in the running for being the March pick because it will come out at the end of February. So that doesn't put it too outside of the publication schedule. We wouldn't be getting it much later than, well, we would be getting it at the end of March if that's the case. So, I could be wrong. There were a couple that potentially fit this one. I guess I picked Fathom Folk because that's what I hope it is. But there was another one. The other one that I think could be it is Compass and Blade by Rachel Greenlaw. Yeah, so Compass and Blade also comes out at the end of February 29th. I'm really not sure with either of these if the emojis properly line up with what information I have, but they both have, mythical creatures that live underwater or in the ocean. So yeah, I think it could be either of them. But since both of them come out at the end of February, if they were March picks, we would be getting them fairly late. So I'm not sure. But then again, I think they did that already because November's book is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. And that one has also been out already. It came out last month in October. So I guess it's not totally out of the realm of possibility. My fingers are crossed that it's Fathom Folk though. So yeah, that is my review of a year's worth of Illumicrate books. Like I said, I will be continuing my subscription. Honestly, it's because of the unlimited skip feature, and it does help me kind of go outside of my comfort zone of not just authors and books that I already am familiar with, but also beyond just like whatever other book content creators on Book Talk and Booktube are recommending. So if you liked this video, feel free to leave a comment down below. Tell me what your favorite Illumicrate book was this year, whether you got the Illumicrate edition or not. Tell me if you think it would have been worth it for a whole year of subscribing. For you, if you are an Illumicrate subscriber, what did you think of the books you've gotten so far? And is there anything you want to see Illumicrate do in the future? Really want to discuss this. Book subscription boxes have become like a very widespread thing in the book community, for good or ill. And I think it is fair to turn a critical eye on the books they choose to put in their monthly boxes and, platform with pretty special editions. But that's all for this video. I hope you all read something wonderful, and I will see you next time.